Let's call the meeting to order at 6:30. Talk about prompt. We have to identify the fact that this is on Zoom as a result of the COVID problems we're having here in the nation, and that this Zoom meeting is being recorded. It's a meeting of the Community Preservation Act Committee, and it is January 5th, 2021, and it's 6:30. Let's identify who's here. James Holyoke, are you here?
I am here.
Elaine Wickstrom,
Yeah, here.
Carolyn McDonald,
Here.
and Eloise Sauls is not a official member, is that right? So we don't have to call her. 1, 2, 3, and Tim Wheeler's here, and we're waiting for MJ.
Yeah,
And
and
we're waiting for,
I think Julie's coming
Julie.
late also, yeah.
that's right, yep, Julie said she had, so she might be a few minutes late. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes? And if so, does someone want to make a motion to accept them?
I'll make a motion to accept.
And a second?
Second.
And any additions or corrections to the minutes of December 1st? Okay, then we'll do a roll call on this. James,
Yes.
Elaine,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Yep.
and I'll vote yes, so that's unanimous at the time.
Looks like MJ's here now too.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I
You-
was having a little trouble getting,
You're with us now, though.
yes,
Welcome and Happy New Year.
here.
Eloise is muted. I don't know if she wants to open her speaker.
She said she'd fade into the background and if she had
Okay.
something that she wanted to holler about, she would.
Okay.
James, you and Eloise worked on some text in regard to housing,
Yep.
and did you upload that to the
I did not. I just emailed it to everybody. I didn't know where I was supposed to
Okay.
upload it to.
That's fine. So if people can look at that document as we go along. It's our objective tonight, it seems, is we want to look at the different sections that people have worked on. We want to devise a strategy for how we want to proceed with working on those sections as we go forward. I want to report on a conversation I had with June today, which was real good. And I've also got a little email correspondence with Stuart from the consortium there in Boston. And so we can review that too. Does anybody want to start? Carolyn, do you want to start talking about what you worked on with
Sure,
open space and recreation?
sure. So basically what I did is I went into the document that Margaret uploaded. And made a copy of it so that I could edit it without editing the main document. And then just edited the open space. I wasn't sure if we were following that exact same format. So I just put in the changed the open space portion, edited some of the recreation portion, and asked Julie to edit it as well. So between her and I, and then I just deleted everything else, all of the other Lexington stuff from my copy so that it's just open space and rec. And that is in Google Drive, but I don't know if it's shared.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw it all.
Okay.
Yep. And so MJ's piece is on there. Elaine, I loaded yours onto there.
Okay.
And and Carolyn's is on there as well. So all three of those pieces are there for people to catch up with as they find time.
Okay, I just have to figure out a way around it to get on.
Right?
Have you
So-
been able to get on that site?
No. There's a problem with our Google, the instructions said if you had a pin. So I thought, oh, fine, I'll be golden, but there was no pin. If you have an invite and a pin, not a problem.
Hmm.
But Margaret didn't provide a pin. Hi, Margaret. And our Google thing, we have so many different Google accounts that it just wouldn't compute. Okay. Evidently, in changing things, trying to get into other Google things, it affected our access. And so now I don't know which it will agree to. It sent me a code, to get on, and that didn't work. So, I mean, it's
I
very
have a
time-consuming.
feeling, Elaine, I used your, your normal email address, which is not a Google email. So if you could send me your Google email, I could put that in, send it to you again, and you should automatically be able to get into the drive. Okay?
Yeah, our problem is we've had problems with Google before,
Okay.
and we've never ironed them out. We figured, well, okay, that's not important, but now it is important. So I've got to figure something out.
Okay.
Or
Well-
you could just create a new Gmail just for this.
I was going to, and then they showed me that I already had one.
Ah.
Yeah, I know. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, 13 years ago I did it, and I don't know really, so I don't want to bore you with that, but I'll figure something out.
Elaine,
Alright.
I'll work with you to try to get you in.
Okay.
All right, and I just uploaded James's document to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now I have to figure out how to get it. So do we have a Google Drive folder for all of this stuff? I'm not, that part I'm a little unclear on because I have my drive, but it has all of my stuff in it.
Right.
You have a Google Drive. When I go in the background again, I'll send you a share link to it so you could see if you could get in. You should, if you have a Gmail account, you should be able to get in. So I'm going to send it to all of you again. Make sure you can get into the shared drive. Okay.
Okay. So what I'm trying to figure out is how, so I've now uploaded James's document to my drive. How do I get that so that everybody can see it?
You're mute-
Anybody?
you're muted.
Oh,
Margaret, we can't hear you.
oh, she
I'm
is
sorry.
muted.
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Oh, there you go.
If you want to email it to me, I can just move it over to the shared drive for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at Google Drive, so I'm trying to think how.
Yeah,
when-
I'm sure there is a way. That one's a step above my pay grade.
Okay, so if you just email it to me, I'll put it in the shared drive.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
So Carolyn, as you worked with the Lexington piece and modified it to Berlin's, did you find that you were leaving things out that you wanted to include, or?
Not really. I mean, I had to take out some stuff, like they have a golf course, so, but it was pretty much, it was pretty basic. The open space goals are protecting land for environmental reasons, for wells and septics, and for recreational, passive recreational community use. And that was pretty much it. And so I just kind of crossed out Lexington, added Berlin. I did a lot of strike throughs at this point in the draft, just so that we could see what was there, to see if anybody thinks we should include the language instead of just deleting. But it's, you know, it's, you don't want it to be super specific anyway, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future of how we may want to use these funds.
Right.
So you want it to cover everything that we might want to do in a very vague, basic way. And that seems to be what their document does to begin with.
You haven't shared any of this with the Conservation Commission yet, have you?
Not the plan, not the draft, for sure.
So I guess the question for all of us is, at what point do we feel comfortable with reaching out? We need to begin to talk to the different committees that we're representing, I assume. And when do people feel comfortable about doing that?
I think for me, it would, you know, once we get to a point where we think it says what it should say, then we share it with our respective groups and make sure there's nothing they think should be different about it.
So between now and the time we meet again, everybody could go through those documents that are in the file now, review them, and at our next meeting, perhaps we can come to some sort of agreement as to whether we're satisfied at this stage, and then individuals could reach out to the committees that they're involved in. Does that sound reasonable to folks?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add about conservation at this time?
I don't think so. Let me open the document and just kind of, you know, I feel for Julie, being a one-man show.
Right.
And yeah, you know, so the beginning of the section opens with a background. There's some, you know, looks like boilerplate. This is in here because of either the Mass Wetlands Protection Act or CPA language. And I just, you know, open space is one of the defining characteristics of Berlin, which has always prided itself on its rural character and working farms, you know, just kind of did a little write up. And then there's a section that says goals, A and B, A, B, and C, and that's really it. That's all there was in the other one. So, and then it's the same for rec. They don't even get an A, B, and C. So.
Very good. Anybody else have any questions in regard to?
So.
The open
so Tim,
space?
I see you're in here now. Yep.
Right. There's no secrets, are there?
Are you doing the introductory part of it, Tim?
No, MJ is.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
So should I talk about that?
Yeah, let's go ahead, MJ. Why don't you
Okay.
introduce to us what you've got?
Okay, so I pretty much did a draft of the introductory section. The introduction itself, I kind of Frankenstein from what the different plans had. There were some points where I thought they were kind of going into more detail than we really needed, and a few points where I was, you know, looking at the Lexington one, and there was, you know, just a little something that a different plan had, or you know, that I felt we wanted to include. So that was kind of, you know, synthesis of a few things. As it got farther down, more towards things like the decision guidelines, that pretty much left as is, with a few notes on the document of a couple things that I think we probably want to remove, because I thought they were a little more specific than we needed. But since since that I had left mostly as is, I left it in with notes as opposed to just deleting that. And I kind of figured since, like, I look at the 5 plans, everyone's using a different font. I figured I'd put it up a different font, you know, when we're all said and done. We might be structurally keeping a lot of the Lexington one, but it might as well look like it's, a different one. So I, just fiddled a bit with the styling, and if folks thought that was all right, I just, when all the sections are put together, I'd, try to get it together.
No, it looks good. You've got a question here in regard to the decision guidelines, the third bullet, will utilize community goals previously set forth in other public documents that have received wide scrutiny and public input. So I don't have trouble with leaving that in because it reflects on the open space plan and the
Yeah, part of why I put a question on that was I wasn't sure if for all of the categories we had, what I'm afraid I'm not familiar enough with what we do have as planned. So I want to make sure before that was there that there wasn't, I mean, I think in general it's a good goal. I just wasn't sure whether we wanted it as a kind of in stone type goal.
well, we certainly have the housing production plan and we have the open space and recreation plan. So those two are critical and they exist and have been updated in recent history. So, they're functional. So I'd say leave that in. And then you've got a question about the acquisition, creation, preservation, and support of community housing, including items such as annual payments to the housing authority to preserve or expand the affordable housing supply. We can talk about that when we hit the housing issue. Obviously we don't have a housing authority, but we're beginning to reach out to a consortium.
Yeah.
Well, Hudson spearheads it, but there's half a dozen towns that participate. And I guess next week there's a vote by that group to decide whether Berlin could participate. And if that were the case, then
we could edit it to reflect that. Yeah. And then there was one paragraph that I just, I thought was a little simpler once the other plans were in place to try to get the wording on that.
That's interesting. That's good. Good. Do people have questions for MJ on this as it stands at this point?
Haven't really read through it yet, but I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, it follows suit with Lexington, and I think it covers a lot of the bases. Again, if people get a chance to dig into these documents between now and the next time we meet, that would be great, because then we could see if there's particular areas that we think need more attention or strengthening.
Right.
Elaine, do you want to talk about the historic preservation section?
Yeah, I looked at some of the really rural towns that I'm familiar with and kind of took a little bit from them. A lot of them have coastal segments that I, didn't bother with, but
Right.
I think, I don't know. I think it sounds okay the way it is. One of the things, I don't know if I got this in here or not, that I had thought about was, and that can probably be in the intro, is how, historic can work with housing. If you're going to use a historical site or a historical building to convert to housing or to rehab for housing, if it's an older house.
Mm-hmm.
That you want to use for affordable housing, or if that would ever come up.
In looking at I guess I was looking at Lexington. Do we want to mention in here the existence of the historical commission and also the we do have, I guess we'd call them historic structures, the 1870 Town Hall and the Bullard House. I noticed that in Lexington's case, of course, they got a tremendous number of sites, but they mentioned those.
Yeah, the different
we don't-
towns in their reports tend, or their plans tend to mention the historical things or particular parcels of conservation land. There's a tendency to detail what assets they have coming in from what I've seen in the different reports and different
Yeah,
categories.
A lot of them have a vast number of historic, I mean, registered historic sites, which we don't
Right.
have.
Yeah.
So
Do
that's
they
the problem we
mention-
have.
Do they
ahead,
mention
James.
what they're targeting or what they already are saving? Like what they might use for future funds?
Well,
in
I
it?
looked at both. When I first mined the site, of all the towns and everything, I was looking for, well, what did they do with the money? And it was astonishing to see what they did.
Mhm.
And it's varied and very broad and all encompassing, I thought.
Yeah.
And they've also got a lot more funds than we do too. But they've got a very active communities. They have a lot of people to draw from. And we're a tiny little town, and it's hard to get people like recreation and everything. I mean, right now anyway, we need a few more people on some of the commissions.
Well, one of the things that may happen is that people may follow the money.
Right.
And
That's what I'm
some of this money may generate some enthusiasm where it, hadn't come forward in the past. So
Right.
That's a hope anyway. The fact that we've got a controlled atmosphere storage, curatorial storage, I'd say if you want to add something about Bullard 1870, the commission and storage, that.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to be specific like that. I did send my my wording to the historic commission because we don't meet until later on in the month,
Okay,
and I wanted them to have time to review it and have more input. So I should have more input by the next meeting.
that's great. Any other questions for Elaine right now?
So somebody had mentioned, I think MJ, you were saying that that other towns call out specific either properties or open space. And James, you kind of asked the question, but I'm not sure that I'm clear. So when people call it out, is it money that they hope to, that this money, is it projects that this money will go towards? Or is it open space or historical stuff that people already have in town that this will help further?
I think some of it is just kind of an almanac of facts that I mean, some of these reports more than others go into a lot of detail. Some of it, that doesn't seem particularly necessary. But I mean, some of it is just, just a brief outline. Our conservation commission has protected blah blah blah. Property. I think some of that is kind of useful because it if someone doesn't really know the town very well for whatever reason, talking about what we need to preserve or, more open space is good, but it's kind of good if they have some idea of what we have to begin with,
Right.
that some kind of grounding,
Right.
for and I think, if each section kind of had a paragraph of what we have as assets in those particular areas, that it'd be useful without bogging things down with a lot of charts. And whenever I see big charts in these plans, I'm like, God, no, anyone who cares that much about the detail can go find that someplace. That seems a little too much for me, but
But
Okay.
maybe as we go and as funds are used to save certain properties, we update. And maybe conservation could put in something like whatever 11 Turner Road was saved through CPA funds. You know, as we go further down
Yeah.
each year. Because I'm sure Lexington maybe has had this for 5 or 10 years or whatever. So
Yeah.
they've already been able to say what they've saved through the CPA funds.
Right.
Yeah, that was another factor when kind of Frank is shining parts of the introduction was, I think one of these towns, this was their second year of operation, but none of them, it was their first year plan. So I kind of tried to make some of the language a little more loose for the fact that, we're starting out. Don't
So
wa-
does this need to be updated every year?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I looked at Hudson's, and if you get a chance, that's an example of a town that every year they've left in part of their update from the years before. So you see the progression of what they've tended
Oh,
to
that's
over
cool.
the course of time.
Right.
So it becomes a living document in that sense. It represents their accomplishments over time.
Right.
And I think, we're right. We don't want to confine ourselves by being too specific at this stage. Being general, like you mentioned, and I think Elaine feels that way from the start, probably gives us the broadest opportunity to expand as we go forward and not get tied down by language that we include at this stage. James, do you want to tell us about your conversation with Eloise?
Yes, and Eloise, you can step in at any point if I say it wrong, but I also took Lexington's template, and there was some stuff that worked, like the fact that both of the towns meet the 40B minimums currently, which I believe is true. But we also took it probably maybe a step further than we needed to and started talking about kind of what aspects of community housing we should focus on. And we were in an agreement that kind of the best way to maybe get this money directly in residents' hands, I should say, was one factor in what we wanted to focus most on was keeping residents in their homes that maybe are having a little issue, and focusing on maybe a new roof for somebody or siding, energy efficient items or windows, grants through that of people that qualify income wise could have that option of applying for something. Second was grants for first-time buyers or less qualified residents with Berlin ties could apply for down payment assistance to buy homes in Berlin, if they can find any that are in an affordable range. And then kind of behind that was getting into building, new structures and new complexes for the affordable housing. I think we kind of felt that the oversight and the cost was so much right now that it might be better off focusing on helping people who are already in town that might be struggling a little more with keeping up their houses of the community housing aspect. So we just got kind of talking into that about what we wanted to do, but it was also something that we'd have to talk about kind of with the group. Hold on 1 minute. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So I don't know if Eloise wants to add anything, but yeah, we basically just took the template from Lexington, tried to make it sound as much to Berlin as we could. And then we went a little of what should we be focusing on and what we'd like to see. And we both kind of came up with that whole helping out first-time buyers and residents that are already in town may make more sense than trying to do full housing complex and trying to figure all that out with engineering and huge expenses that way. The fastest way to get the money into people's hands would be through these grants of people who qualified.
And we know that's an allowable use for this?
I believe that was some of it was in the Lexington thing, but I believe it is. We'd have to check that.
That's fabulous. That's,
Oh,
Yeah,
Lexington,
if that's allowable, I mean, that would be my biggest concern would just be whether, how it fits into the rules. But I think as far as an aspiration, it is a well-conceived one.
yeah,
no, Lexington includes some of that language. And if you go to the website for the Consortium for Community Preservation Act towns, there's a number of opportunities there to look. There's a lot of frequently asked questions, and some of those relate to a lot of the topics that we're talking about tonight. So that's the nice thing about this organization, is that they've been around long enough so they've heard it all in terms of questions from a lot of communities. So
right.
the answers are there for a lot of the questions we're going to have. We're not going to have to rewrite the book.
Right. Right.
I am familiar with a program like what James is talking about. But what the town does is you have to sign something to say that, if you stay in that house for 10 years, you don't have to pay anything back.
Mm.
Okay. But if something happens to that person and their family sells the house, there is a lien on the property.
Mhm.
So that, they don't get the benefit of all the work that's been done and then just turn around and sell it without, giving some back to the town.
Right.
Yeah.
What town is
That's
that?
that's part of, I'm sorry,
What town is that?
Westport.
Really?
Yeah, I think that would have to be in there so somebody just didn't apply for
Right.
vinyl siding or something and
Right.
then immediately put their
Right.
house on the market.
Yeah.
Right. Because they need to
Yeah.
sell the house and they can't afford to reside it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did get pretty specific talking about other properties and stuff that I think probably needs to be taken out of there, but that
For a
was just,
first draft.
yeah, there
Yeah.
she is.
That's very exciting, though,
Oh,
that
that's good.
those are provisions that are allowed.
They are, or that,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, we just wanted them up for discussion.
Good.
Okay.
I feel like it trims the fat and lining, when you get into big projects, the engineers get paid, everybody gets paid. This more, people can see it directly. And I think the residents who are most affected by the CPA tax on these limited incomes will like to see that, they're actually can benefit from it rather than somebody buying a brand new house. Anyone on a fixed income can now see how that might get right into their house.
And we're
Uh,
not calling it a tax, James.
Oh, sorry.
It's a
We,
surcharge.
we also, we also tried to address the fact that they would need objective as opposed to subjective criteria.
Mhm.
In other words, they would have to have an energy audit through National Grid. That way you don't have favoritism. They spell out what your house needs. It's a independent third party, so to speak.
Yep.
And or if you needed the financial assistance, you had to be on the assessor's hardship list. I, for one, didn't want to get into somebody's personal information.
Mhm.
In order to qualify for hardship, you do have to give that information to the assessors. So if they okay you, that's good enough for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
I mean, we definitely would have to get into the nitty gritty on
Yeah, but we felt that
quotes
was
and everything, but yeah, this was a good,
first round.
yeah.
Good.
That's excellent.
So in the case of housing, of course, your committee is scattered to the wind, Eloise.
Yeah, but they're sort of available by Zoom.
So, you and James have talked this over. You've got,
We need more members.
yeah.
Have you been able to get officially appointed as part of us? Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to, I'm the only one that's currently around in Berlin.
Ah,
Linda Nelson's in Arizona. Trudy can't drive, but I'm pretty sure, the last time I talked to her, her computer wasn't working right. So I wasn't sure she could go to a Zoom meeting.
Okay,
And then she had her disaster with the car, so I was the only one that's available, but I don't want to grab all the posts, you know?
well, you know, as long as James is willing to continue to work with you, I think that makes a lot of sense, so,
We make a good team.
yeah,
Yep.
good. Any questions about housing right now from folks? So our task then with these topical sections is to have everybody take a chance at going over those documents that are in the file now. And how do you feel? Do you want to give feedback between now and the next time we meet directly to the folks that are working on that section, if you've got any comments, and that way they can add or modify what they've got in their section already? People comfortable with that?
Yeah, you like in the form of comments on there in the Google Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Good. So that's that for that section, I suspect. That we talked last time, I think in the minutes, didn't we have a question as to whether or not we could proceed what we wanted to do about our motion for annual town meeting?
Yes.
And we decided, what was the question?
Question was whether we could allot 5% administrative, 5% of the money for administrative costs for FY 21, I
22.
think.
That's right.
Well, we definitely want to do it for 22. We weren't sure if we could do it for the current year
So
and have access to the money.
we were interested in having access to the money. So I got in touch with Stuart. And he says, well, what he says he says, there is a way, but it still requires town meeting approval. So, I mean, I essentially said to him, we're interested in having some of the funds available for administrative purposes between now and town meeting in case we needed it. And he says the committee would vote to recommend, and he says there probably isn't a town meeting scheduled for quite a while, right? Here's how you could get funds for this fiscal year. So that's this fiscal year, which is fiscal 21. The CPC would vote to recommend that money be placed in an administrative fund for the CPC for the balance of fiscal 21. And the source of the appropriation would be the fund balance account. Normally, the source for the administrative funds would be your fiscal 21 revenue, but any appropriations for fiscal 21 would have to have been approved by town meeting before your town's fiscal year 21 tax rate was set. And since that wasn't done, the only funding source you can use now is the fund balance. You can use up to 5% of your annual anticipated revenue for the CPC administrative account. Your annual revenue is right around 500,000, so I'm guessing that you could ask for about 25,000 in administrative funding. What do you think you'll need the money for, and when would you need it? So I don't think we've identified when we'd need it or what we'd need it for, and perhaps we won't at all, but we did want to ask that question, and that's the answer that he was able to give us. So there is a means.
Right, so basically we would have to take it out of that 70% account that we voted to set aside last time. Is
Right.
that
And
accurate?
I had a great conversation with June today, and I'm not saying that just because she's listening in. In fact, if Margaret, can we bring June into the mix here? Because if she's willing, or is Margaret this?
It looks like she's promoting her. Yep.
I'm trying to promote her.
Hello.
Hi, June.
Hi, Tim. Thank you so much for being so sweet.
Well, you're sweet. We talked for a good while this morning, and I think, I said, we all recognize the fact that this is a lot of extra work for June and her office there, because there's what she's done so far is set up the 3 10% accounts, and then the general account that collects the other 70%. And that's money. Well, maybe I'll let June, do you want to chat a little bit about this so people are all on the same page? Because I may misstep here.
Sure. Just to pretty much overview is that because we didn't have the committee set up the very first year that we were doing it, I have the authority to designate 10% of the funds into the 3 categories. I don't have them here in front of me, Tim, so you may have to help me out here. But I believe it's the historical, open space, and
Housing.
Housing.
Thank you, Eloise. And then the balance of it, the 70% stays in pretty much the general fund balance. So currently, those amounts at the end of June 30th, the amount that was collected for the full year, I took the 10%, and so it's set up into those categories already. So that's your starting place for this year. I gave Tim a breakdown of what revenues have come in so far this year, so that you'll have some idea on what we're looking at so far. And we did talk about setting up to have at the next town meeting, whether it be a special or an annual, that you could set up a special article that would set aside the 5% or whatever dollar amount it is, up to 5%, for administrative expenses that you may have. And he also discussed something about setting up another type of a reserve that would also come out of the general fund balance for additional expenditures, I believe is the way that Tim, you had said.
Right.
And that would be set up at the next town meeting that we have, whether it be a special or at the annual for the following year. The funds then, as of the end of June, from those appropriations would be turned back to that fund. So it wouldn't be lost, it just wouldn't be spent.
So what June has essentially outlined is there's the 3 key accounts, one for each of those categories: housing, open space, and historic. But one of the things that the website talks about is, it says, after the CPC has figured out the amount of your total anticipated revenue that will be used for projects, administrative expenses, and the 10% category reserves, there may be additional anticipated CPA revenue that you don't have an immediate need for. An optional budget reserve account can be included in the CPA budget to temporarily park this money in case you need it for additional projects that arise during the year. And if you don't place this money in a budgeted reserve, you will temporarily lose access to the funds when the town sets its tax rate in the fall. So June and I talked about the notion that we'd probably include that type of account as well. And that, according to the pardon? And that gives us sort of maximum flexibility. So that was kind of, again, the nice thing about this, and June and I talked about this, is we don't make decisions other than recommendations based on the applications that we get. we go to town meeting and the people decide, and that's the beauty of this.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, people can reflect on the fact that money was allocated to certain uses and causes and stuff, but it's the people that are going to decide at town meeting. So that's the fun part. But by
So,
putting
question
money in
for
this, go ahead.
So for like the community housing, how we were talking about maybe putting on somebody's roof or something like that, or fixing it, would it say, $10,000 to be transferred over so that Tim Wheeler can get a new roof? Or is it just in the fund? And then like, how specific would it be for voting for each of those items? If we have 30,000, is there 3 names on it? Do we get that far into it?
I think what you're going to find is that it's going to be a general use, probably administered by some entity. Now, our problem right now is that the housing partnership probably wouldn't want to manage that. But if we're working with this consortium out of Hudson in those 5 towns, it may be an opportunity we can explore with them, where certain amount of money goes into a fund that they help us administer, and then people are able to, apply to that. So that the specific use and the individual aren't part of the warrant article, but it's a fairly specific type of use that's going to be administered through some source that we can identify.
Okay.
So then if someone were to apply for assistance, they wouldn't necessarily apply to us, they would apply to the consortium that we're part of.
That's my sense, but I mean, again, we're early
Right.
in this, so we got to do some
Sure.
homework, but that ideally would be the way that it would work. You'd have the housing partnership with, be the proponent that would advocate for funds to go into this special use category, administered by the consortium perhaps, but controlled by the Berlin Housing Partnership somehow.
Right. So for example, if 3 people applied for these grants and the total was $30,000, our part of our recommendation would be $30,000 to this consortium to fulfill these grants.
Yeah, I mean, again,
Right.
we're
Yeah, no, our current understanding or our current
well, that's
wish.
where going to the website there for the Community Preservation Act. The number of projects that you can look up and see how other towns have creatively used the funds, I think is going to give us a better idea of, how we can roll this out so people in town, particularly the 3 entities or the 4 entities that are most impacted, understand what the opportunities are, and we can direct them to that website too, so they can, come up with innovative ideas about.
Sure.
Because like everybody said, once you start looking at what other towns have done, you're amazed, the opportunities are endless.
Right.
Margaret, did you want to say something?
Well, no, when you were talking about the consortium, I think the mechanism would probably be that the town pays its assessment to the consortium to do certain pieces of work. But the reserve fund that Tim was talking about would hold the money for the qualified applicants for repairs. That's what I'm thinking, more so than the money going to the consortium to pay out.
Right.
But like Tim said, that's something that we have to work out with them. We'll be paying an assessment to the consortium for the work they're going to help us with. So it's good to have a sense of what we might be asking them to do.
And they did indicate that there's a willingness on their part to explore other opportunities where we might very well buy into some other service from them that wouldn't be part of the basic fee.
Yep.
And they've said that other towns that they're working with have asked for similar types of opportunities to work with them on perhaps, buying and owning property, that sort of thing. And they've shied away from that, but they're certainly willing to explore that with us. If in the case of our losing a piece of property that's on the SHI now, the subsidized housing inventory. So the nice thing is we've got that opportunity to work with them. There's Central Mass Regional Planning. There's tons of different groups that I think we can help. They'll hold our hand as we try to explore some of these opportunities. So it's kind of fun.
Right. Because we also don't want to overpromise and then
Right.
find out that something that we said people could do, they can't do.
Yeah.
So,
The interesting thing is when you look at the 6 towns that surround us, I was looking at what they were generating for income, and Bolton, Boylston, and Clinton don't even participate yet. Marlboro doesn't participate either.
no,
Yeah,
Hudson,
I'm really surprised.
Hudson's at 1%, and maybe Northborough's at 1%. So they both, in terms of their state reimbursement or match, get less than we do, even though they're considerably larger. And then if you look at the next ring of towns, Harvard gets less than we do. Sterling, Lancaster aren't in it, although Lancaster voted to participate, I guess, this time around. West Boylston's at a lesser percentage. Southborough's at a lesser percentage. Shrewsbury just got involved, and Westboro, so they'll obviously, but I don't think they went for 3%. And Stow's the only town that in our immediate area that's pulling in more of a match than we are, and they're at 3% and have been that way for a long time.
right. Yeah. Stuart said that we were one of 7 towns in the past 10 years to vote in the 3%. So,
No, that was a good move.
yep.
I made a point in the introduction to mention that we were getting more money for doing the 3%, because I figure people were, not into, there's certainly plenty of people who didn't want to do the CPA. So I saw a little letting them know they made the right choice was worth adding it.
All right, what else? We want to talk about the next time we meet.
Yes.
And
yeah.
what's-
Oh, Eloise, where did you want me to send the minutes? Do you want me to just upload it to my town government?
Yep,
All right.
thank you.
You're welcome.
do we want to put the minutes on our folder here so that we can look at them each time and then we could delete them in between?
Happy to.
It's always good to have them in where you need them, when you need them.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? So between now and when would you like to meet? How much time do folks think they need to flesh out the first step here in the plan?
Well, conservation's meeting tomorrow, so I will tell everybody that I'm gonna, so I'll just forward what I've written to Conservation Commission members for comment.
Sure.
Yeah, so essentially, Elaine has been discussing this with the Historical Commission folks.
Not
Um,
yet.
well,
That's coming up.
But you've shared it with them, I guess, right?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, and you'll be talking to them. James is talking to Eloise, and that's basically the housing partnership at this stage. And
Yeah.
do you want to
And-
send it off to Linda, Eloise, and just
I
get her to?
do. I do.
Yeah, so that covers that. And if you talk to the folks on conservation, Julie Lee
is rec.
and is rec. So, I mean,
Yeah.
if you chat with her, then basically we've covered the bases, right?
Yep.
And MJ, you and I can play around with what you've got started there, I would think.
Yeah, and I imagine we'll want to put together the glossary or appendices rather.
Yep.
And could you also put together the article for whatever meeting comes next? Be it a special or the annual town meeting?
Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea, because when's the warrant close?
Usually around Valentine's.
So we've basically got 5 weeks. So if we meet halfway between now and then, that would give us a chance to make sure we've got an article ready to submit.
And are we going to have anything in the town report?
Town report, we're due to fold on that at the end of the month, 29th or something like
Yeah.
that. So
My birthday.
I'll put,
Easy to remember.
why don't I draft up a report for the committee, and then we can look at that the next time we meet as well.
Do you want to draft up what you might be putting on the town meeting agenda too?
Yeah, so I'll generate some articles for the town meeting and an annual report, short and sweet. What other housekeeping we got?
If you'd like me to just share my screen for a second so you can see the subfolders I just set up for you in your shared drive.
Holy mackerel. Yes.
Well, okay, so here you go. So you should all have editing access to this, meaning you should all, hopefully, you'll all be able to get in, you'll be able to add documents, and you'll be able to edit documents. So the folders I just added were your meeting minutes, because you were talking about having the meeting minutes in one central location. So I added that.
Good.
And
Awesome,
I
thank
added the CPAC draft plan chapters. And the only thing in there at the moment is the one from Carolyn. So I've put that in
Right.
here, and it's actually a link. It's a link to her folder where its home is. So, okay. So hopefully, and you can add subfolders yourselves if you'd like, however you think it'll work, best. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Awesome.
It's getting scary. Good.
All
Anything
right.
else tonight?
So we have to pick our next meeting night.
Yep. What's good for folks?
Right.
MJ, tell us what nights work for you.
Well, Tuesdays are working the best for me. I don't work Tuesdays and Fridays, so.
And Tuesdays are generally pretty good for other people. How about James? Are you still with us? Did James disappear, that little devil?
As long as you can deal with some. What?
Oh,
As long
there
as
he
we can
is.
deal with-
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Tuesdays are fine. You got to deal with some screaming kids, but Tuesday's fine.
That's fine.
Such is life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tuesdays are fine.
So
12th, 19th, planning board meets on the 20th.
no, don't we, planning board's gonna be on the 12th and the 26th
Right.
this month.
The only thing I have to worry about is the AgCom. They meet on Tuesdays. I don't have that in front of me.
February vacation, I'm in Vermont. That's the only problem I
Right.
have.
We want to look at our report, which is due before the end of January. And
Right.
so the 19th, is that good for folks? 2 weeks?
19th.
Yep.
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 I'm-
6:30 still good for folks, or do you want to do,
7
Yep.
would be a little bit better for me, but not so much that if everybody else.
it sounds like Julie Lee might have it easier if it was 7, because
Yeah, I was wondering that myself, so.
He's-
Right.
she didn't think she'd get home till,
Like
Quarter
quarter
of
of
7 anyway.
7, yeah.
so shall we say 7
Okay,
on the 19th?
I'll book the Zoom and email you all the link.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need me to put it on my town government or are you all set with that?
How's Carolyn? Carolyn, you're
it's-
gonna put the minutes on?
I'm definitely gonna do the minutes, and I have only ever edited posts because
I can-
Eloise, yeah,
I can
Eloise
post
would
it
just put
for-
up a generic and I would just edit.
Okay.
is
Uh,
that
put
what
it
you
up
want
on
me
my
to do, Tim?
Yeah, are you comfortable, Eloise, helping us with that?
Sure.
So the agenda basically would be continue to review the plan, review the
Discussions.
annual report and possible articles for the town meeting
Okay. Will do.
and any other exciting business to come before us.
Oh, it's
I
all
am
exciting,
interested-
isn't it, Tim?
Yes, it is. That's right.
It actually is. I'm enjoying
Yeah.
listening to your meetings.
Well, it's nice. I think Stuart mentioned this too in our first meeting. There's no stress because we get to give away money. You know, it's no, we're not, there's a lot of the stuff that happens on other boards, there's none of that stress associated with this.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Knock on
There
wood.
will be, when somebody's project doesn't get funded, there'll
Yeah.
be complaints.
We'll be the bad guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's
Always.
less stress. I wouldn't say no stress. That anytime decisions have to be made and work has to be done, there's
Right.
always the potential for stress.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn
So
So,
moved.
in a second?
second,
Very good. And we'll do a roll call. James
yes.
and family,
Says bye.
Elaine,
Yes.
MJ,
Aye.
Carolyn,
aye.
Tim, I. Very good.